And now, suspense.
I need $300.
For what?
Merch.
No, you know I'm saving for nursing school.
You and every other stripper.
Spend your own money.
At least I don't go shaking.
End is here.
No problem. You can find your own ride home.
So we kind of touched on about like, doing the whole New York grind theater and everything like that and going to school for that. What kind of when did you first realize that you wanted to get into acting?
It's funny. I was actually thinking about maybe answering this question yesterday when I was driving home from work. I grew up playing basketball. I grew up really from about 7 or 8 years old. I played basketball, boys club, and then some of the city leagues. And then I played AAU, and then I got to high school. And the summer before my freshman year, I actually made the high school roster for the summer tournaments and summer camps and all these things. So I was an 8th grader going into 9th grade, but I was playing with the kids who were already in high school. And there was only 3 of us coming from 8th grade that got to make that jump to the high school game before the school year started. One of my teammates actually ended up winning a national championship at University of Arizona, went to the NBA. So I was like, okay, basketball is going to be my ticket into college, D2 or D3, kind of what I was thinking. Cause I'm not big. I'm just, but I was pretty good. So I had this coach my freshman year who was really awful. I mean, he was just kind of I'm all for hard-nosed coaches. I'm all for accountability and discipline and all these things that sports provide. But this was beyond that. This dude was just mean. He was just a mean person. And it kind of killed my love for competitive basketball, at least playing it. I love to watch it. I'm loving my son going through that experience in a different way. So I kind of quit basketball. And then I noticed after that there was this kind of void in my life. I needed some sort of outlet, whether it was sports or creative or something. So I decided to sign up for drama class in high school. And I remember walking out onto the stage sort of under that warm yellow orange light and the curtains and the cool air and quiet in the backstage area. And I was like, okay, this feels kind of like home, And so I did high school theater, and then I decided to I went to New Mexico State University for my undergrad because it was 250 miles from Albuquerque. So it was close enough to home to go home for the weekends and holidays and stuff, but it was far enough away from mom and dad to kind of feel like I was on my own. And I got into a general theater class, and then I got into an acting class. And then I went and auditioned for the 3 or 4 plays that were going to go up that first semester. And I got a role. I knew that I wanted to be a theater major. I knew that I wanted to pursue acting or some aspect of theater as a path after school. My dad's a small business owner, and I think the plan he always had in his mind was for me to go to college, study business, come back, take over the business so he could retire, whatever. But I knew in my heart, I'm in this play and this is what I want to do. So I sat down and I composed this hour-long email. And this was in 1996. So right when email was just sort of even a thing. And I wrote this heartfelt email to my dad, and I'm literally in tears telling him why I wanted to be a theater major and not a business major, and expecting some pushback from him. And 2 hours later, I get an email back, and he was like, "Oh, dude, go for it." He was like, I'm not paying for your college contingent upon what you choose to do as a major. I'm paying for it because I want you to find your way in the world. So I was like, So I immediately dropped my marketing classes and my business classes, and I loaded up on theater classes and went through I was actually down there for 5 years because how college overlaps classes that Yeah. So I was down there for 5 years, fell in love with it even more than I already was, and then thought, okay, what's the next step? And all the professors kind of, I don't want to say pushed, but they made this recommendation that graduate training was the next step. So I went to a unified regional university and regional theater auditions, URTA, in New York City, and auditioned for 40 graduate schools. Got accepted to one, but decided not to go. So I waited 3 years, went back to grad school, and I went down to Illinois, outside Chicago, to Northern Illinois University, and studied in a master's of acting program with a really, really prominent American teacher for a year. Didn't want to finish the second or the second and third year of grad school because it was like, okay, I think I'm ready to go embark on a professional career. I'm spinning my wheels in school. So I left, came to Albuquerque. And if I remember it correctly, I think I took my headshot with my resume to the woman who is now my agent the same day I drove back from Illinois to Albuquerque. I just ran it. I said, I just got in from graduate school. I'm a trained actor. Here's my headshot. Here's my resume. And she said, I think I can represent you. And I've been with that same agent for going on 17 years now. It was an interesting journey of like being an athlete and then deciding not to do that anymore and trying to find something to fill that void. And acting and theater and film has been definitely it. I mean, I have found a way to use acting to support myself at some level for almost half of my life now. You know, I do film and TV and theater when I can. I do high risk law enforcement scenarios where I'm kind of acting and teaching at the same time so they can learn how to deal with a broad spectrum of human beings in the real world. That's probably my favorite aspect of my acting career, if I'm honest, because the acting is probably the best I ever do. And the only people that see it are police officers and psychologists. It's not entertainment. It's a different form of acting. It's teaching, but it feels rewarding because I know I've had officers approach me in public 10 years after they were in a scenario with me going, you know what, dude, that was so realistic that I've met people on the street and I think back to you and it helped me handle them the correct way in the real world. And so that's a pretty rewarding thing. I think it takes a different kind of actor. There's not very many of us in town that do it because it's hyper emotional, it's hyper serious. And then there is that aspect of having to keep the teaching element in the back of your head at all times because you're showing these officers how to deal with a person who's in crisis while you're living through the crisis as an actor. I mean, it's a wild ride with the intended purpose of training police officers to use de-escalation skills rather than having to use force on calls.
Are you able to kind of like switch off, get like those method actors that take a little bit to kind of get out of their own headspace from a character? Do you find that being able to switch that off pretty easy?
You know, I think every actor, at least classically trained actors, we all read the Stanislavski book, right? An Actor Prepares. And his method in Russia, he was kind of the foundational teacher of what is modern acting. His method, he asked his actors to actually dig up memories from their own lives, things that actually happened, to bring about the correct emotions for the scene that they were in. You know, so he would say, you know, if you're supposed to be devastated emotionally on the stage, think back to a time when you saw something terrible happen to another human being, or your dog died, or blah, blah, blah. And then the actor would get to this correct emotional state, but they used a situation that they may have already healed from to bring those emotions back up. So the teacher that I studied, Sanford Meisner, kind of took that work and said, okay, hey, we can bring about these emotions in an entirely authentic way through the use of your imagination. So I was taught that you can do the same emotional preparation by imagining things that could happen in your life. You know, so if I need to be emotionally devastated on stage or in a police training scenario or on a scene in a film or TV show, I can imagine something that could happen very realistically in my life, and it still brings me to those authentic emotions. But once the scene is over or the play is over or whatever is over, I go, oh, that wasn't real. The emotions produced were real, but the thing that caused them is not. And I think that's a lot healthier. And I know that we've seen some guys, some big time actors. I think Christian Bale has suffered psychologically because of his work. We know that Daniel Day-Lewis has, because he quit. He said, I can't take it anymore. And I wonder, what was it about his method that didn't allow him to separate, like you asked? Like, what was it about how he was preparing for roles that didn't allow him to disconnect when the role was over? And when I teach, I really try to steer students away from using real life circumstances to bring themselves to authentic emotions. I say, we can do the same thing with our imagination. And then once class is over or the scene is over, you take a deep breath and go, okay, that wasn't real. the thing that came out was powerful and real, but what caused it was not. To answer your question, I don't find it hard to turn off because I use that method. I use my imagination to bring myself to truthful emotions.
That's actually a really good way of doing that, just because sort of like the mental health of a lot of actors doesn't come into play a lot of times when they're trying to come up with those ways of coming up with those emotions. Like, I guess that kind of gets put to the side, like, oh, I'm gonna make this scene as real as possible, but I guess they don't really think of like the after effects of that.
There's already enough emotional investment in just the life of being an actor. There's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of close calls that don't come about. So why add another layer of something that could damage your mental health in the long run to your work? Then there's also the argument that maybe actors and artists in general are sort of troubled. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just we're working through a lot of things in our own minds, and there needs to be an outlet for it. And maybe it's painting or music or acting or comedy or whatever. So yes, mental health should be thought about in approaching your own method to finding the truth in your own acting. And I've done that. I can say almost 100% throughout my whole career, my college career, my professional career. I just refuse to lose myself in it.